Hi, this is Steve from Mission Bell Communications, and in this video, I'm going to be kicking off a new series I'm calling Above the Fold. Now, if you've worked in web design before or worked with a web designer, you may be familiar with the term, but it's something that we as web designers have stolen from the newspaper industry. So historically, newspapers always had the most compelling story of the day on the front page. And because the newspapers were always folded and then stacked, what was above the fold was the part that was going to be visible to someone who's walking by the newsstand or someone who sees a pile of newspapers. So you always wanted to make sure that you maximize the potential of what was on the front page above the fold. So in the same way, when it comes to a website, a lot of the traffic's going to come to your homepage, and whatever appears above the scroll line would be above the fold. Now we want to make sure that that content is as optimized as it can be, that it's the most compelling, that it's the most interesting, that it's got the hook that you want to get people to read more. So in this series, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be looking at some websites where perhaps they haven't really done a good job of maximizing the potential of the space above the fold. And we're going to redesign those so that they will have a greater effectiveness. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So I am going to be looking at a website on this episode that I'm actually in the process of rebuilding for a client. In the future, I may just choose ones at random, but this one was convenient for me, so here we go. So when we're looking at the content above the fold, really there's two elements in place. There is the main header here, and then there is what we call the hero section. So the hero section is kind of that top section that typically has what we would say a value proposition. And here is the biggest problem with this, is there is no value proposition. So what we want to do is we want to have a headline that jumps out and grabs you and says, this is why you should do business with us. In this case, we have a short section here that just has an image. And this image is a piece of machinery that this company does have, but we have no context and we have really no sales pitch at all. We do have some content underneath here, and this sort of content would typically be below the fold. It's not very good for a couple of reasons. First off, the headline is very boring. Now you can have a headline that says about integrated mechanical, but that really would better be served on an interior page. So, but we have no headline, we have no call to action, and we have this text here, which has, as I said before, a boring headline. And even this text here, ideally, we don't want a big block of text like this. Studies tell us that about 60 to 80 characters max is a comfortable reading length. So if you have very long lines, it's actually difficult for people to get from the end of this line over to the beginning of this line. So it just makes it hard to read. What's more is the line height here is a lot smaller than it should be. In this case, our line height is about 1.25. So for a block of text, ideally we want that to be about 1.5 or 1.6. And there is a train. Paradoxically, the content that we have here is too narrow. So what I mean by that is on any website, there's going to be a content width, which is the width that most of the content is going to fall within. In this case, our content width would be, you can see if we drew a line here, like let me grab a guide here, and we were to set it somewhere from here to around here. So it is about 980 pixels. Now that used to be a common content width, like back in the day when monitors were like 1024 or 1200 pixels wide. Most people have monitors that are far wider than that now. I think on the low end would be about 1400, but most people are using a monitor that's say 1920 pixels wide. I'm using a much wider monitor at like 2560 or something like that. So most sites these days from especially larger companies tend to have content widths somewhere in the 1350 to 1600 pixel range. So this does look a little dated. Further, if we go into the header, we can see that the menu and the logo don't respect the content width. Now, you may decide that you want a little more room to give yourself more menu items. But in this case, if I'm looking at this on my full monitor, the logo is all the way to the left and the menu all the way to the right, irregardless of how wide that gets. So that does kind of look really weird on a wide monitor, and everything's sort of all narrow in this little strip in the middle. If we look at the navigation, there are way too many top-level items in this navigation. So first off, I would look here and I would say home. You don't need a home link. Nobody has been using home links for years. Well, that's not to say nobody, but no large company has used a home link in many years. So I sometimes get some pushback on that by people saying that people might not know how to get home. But if you've ever gone to Nike or Starbucks or Apple or Google or any large company's website, the logo is always the home link. You don't need the home link. Our services, now this is critical, but with multiple services, they don't have any sub-navigation. So I would say that that's a bit of an oversight. Some of these items don't really need to be here. So we've got like a gallery page. This is a company that provides industrial services to factories. So like electricians and plumbers and such. They don't have like a lot of great photographs. It's just not the nature of the business, right? If you were talking about landscaping, for example, that might be a really valid thing to have. But in this case, not so much. The safety and certifications, like that needs to be there, but it does not need to be a top-level navigation item. It's not going to drive traffic. Careers typically is a footer link. In this case, they actually do want careers in the top-level navigation because they're actively recruiting some positions. Accessibility, that is pretty much always just a legal exculpation sort of page. There's no need for that to be in the header. I would say that that belongs in the footer. And this search, there is not a lot of content on this site. And if you do the search, you just get a search template that's not particularly helpful. I would say just ditch that. So we have way more top-level stuff than what we really actually need, and we have no call to action. You almost always see a button up here, and that's because we want to provide a clear call to action that people should be taking while they're here. That's pretty low-hanging fruit, and it's just completely missing here. Something else that some people might push back against, but I think is a pretty big no-no, is putting your social links in the header. You are trying to get people on your site to convert. You don't want people leaving your site to go to social media. We want to use social media to drive people to our website. We do not want to use our website to drive people to social media. So that's kind of my critique on the hero section here, or the above the fold section here. So let's move on now to the redesign. Okay, so here we are on the redesigned section above the fold. So the first thing I'm going to point your attention to is the headline. We have a headline, and we say what we do and why people would want to work with us, right? So we are an industrial contractor offering services across multiple trades. And here we can talk about, the team, the history, but very briefly, right? And we have an action that we want people to take, and that is we want them to contact us, okay? We have images that actually have something to do with the business, with the call to action. So we're talking about being a multi-trade contractor here, and we have here a picture of a plumber, a picture of a welder, a picture of an electrician, okay? We have also a more modern content width. In this case, I used 1,440 pixels, which works pretty well on laptops and on desktops. Of course, as we go to mobile, this is all going to change, and it's going to stack, and it's going to become responsive. If we look here at the top-level navigation, we've streamlined that a bit. So we have an about page where we can take that content that was talking about the company, and we put that in a separate page. We have a service pages here. Because this is just an image, we don't actually have the drop-down menu, but you can see here from this caret that there is a drop-down menu, and so you can actually get to each of the services directly from the navigation. We did add a page that talks about the various industries that they serve. We added a news page, which gives them some dynamic content in the form of news releases. And as I said previously, they wanted to keep careers up at the top because they are looking to fill certain positions. We also have a contact button. This, as you can see, it lines up with the call to action that we have here. It stands out because of the contrast. And, this here will convert better. It does a better job of communicating who the company is and why people want to do business with them. And in my opinion, this is going to be a much more effective website homepage because of what people are going to see when they land here than the previous version. So that's all I've got for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, I'd invite you to subscribe to catch more in the future. If you want me to take a look at another website, you can leave a link in the comments to another site and I can take a look at it, and perhaps I will look at that in a future episode. Thanks for watching.